A YouTube viewer recently asked me about the length of a bow in a kite and the diameter of the bow in a kite for matching the kite to particular wind speeds. And I've never dealt with that, I don't think, at least not the way I'm going to do today. Now, there are many things about fighter kites, North American fighter kites, that to me are quite surprising. One of them is this issue right here. Take a look at how little difference there is between this kite in terms of its overall size and this kite and this kite and this kite. I mean, they're just within a quarter of an inch or a half an inch in terms of width, wingtip dimension here to here, and in bow length, very similar. Now, these similarities you would think would make very little difference in the way the kite flies, but that's not true. That's the surprising thing to me. A very small difference in the length of the bow or the diameter of the bow can make a significant difference in the way the kite behaves in the air. Now, when I make a kite, I mark on it the pattern, the length of the bow that I'm using in this kite, and the diameter of the bow. And this one is 0.05 inch. The length of the bow is 22 and a half. And then I write the month I made the kite. Now, all these kites that are on the table here are all Badger patterns. All the differences are in the bow diameter and the bow length. And as a result of a longer bow, the kite's a little bigger. For example, I go from here. This kite uses a 25-inch long bow. It's a 0.05-inch diameter bow. This kite uses a 22.5-inch bow that's 0.05-inch diameter. So quite a difference in the bow length, but if we line these kites up on the spine and the wingtip line, you can see here that even though the bow length is a little bit different in terms of the number of inches, and the kite is, this one is smaller, obviously, but not a whole bunch smaller. It's about, I would estimate 3/4 of an inch difference around the perimeter of the kite. But in a given wind speed, whatever speed you're flying in, let's say it's 5 miles per hour wind, these two kites perform radically different than each other. Even though they're the same pattern, same diameter bow, but they have a different length of a bow and therefore a different size of the sail. All of this I'm describing to point out how the various aspects of the kite influence how well the kite flies in a particular wind speed. Now, for me, and I'm just going to talk about my personal experience, and each kite flyer has a little different preference about these things. For example, I would fly this kite in very, very light wind because it's large. It has a bow that's long enough to be very, very flexible, and it would do well in a very light wind. This kite I can fly in a light wind also. but I wouldn't enjoy it as much. This kite would take a lot more effort, a lot more careful effort applied to line manipulation and line retrieval speed. This kite would fly much, much faster than this kite in the same wind speed because the bow, although it's the same diameter, is a little shorter. And being shorter, it's stiffer and it has less sail area, so there's less wind pressure on it. And in a light wind, that means that the flyer has to create more of the wind. So I have to work harder flying this kite in a 5 mile an hour wind than I do this kite. Now, if my line retrieving skills are good enough, flying either kite is no issue with me. But if my line handling and line retrieval skills are not yet honed well, if I'm just new at flying North American fighter kites, then this kite would not be a kite to choose in a light wind. This would be the kite instead because it's more flexible. The kite sail is larger, the bow diameter is still 0.05-inch diameter, could be 1.3 millimeter, they're about the same, but it's a longer bow, has more sail area, and it's more flexible. It responds quicker to very small changes in wind pressure on the sail compared with this kite. This kite is also relatively flexible, but not nearly as flexible as this one. And when you're starting out flying fighter kites and you go to the place you're going to fly, now I fly in a soccer field at the moment, and sometimes the wind is very, very light. Sometimes it's strong. So I take kites that I can use in either situation so I don't waste my time going there if the wind is at a speed that I didn't happen to have a kite for. But it only takes 2 or 3 kites to have the range you would want to provide good flying fun no matter what skill level you have in flying fighter kites. And the skill level is about retrieval and sensitivity to when you change the line manipulation to get the kite to do what you want it to do when you want it to do it. So this is how you should start out. Use a more flexible kite than you might think is needed. And if it is too flexible, then you just change to a little stiffer kite. Now these kites use a 1.3 millimeter or 0.05-inch diameter carbon fiber bow. Now, if I were flying in stronger winds, then let's say 6 miles an hour or 7 or thereabouts, where these kites would fly well, if it was stronger than that, I would make the same kite pattern, same kite dimensions, and the same range of dimensions using a different bow diameter. I use the same lengths in the various kite sizes I made, but I would use a 1.5 millimeter diameter bow instead of a 1.3 millimeter diameter bow. That would make all the kites of equal size in terms of bow length. For example, this 25-inch bow length using a 1.5 millimeter versus a 1.3 millimeter, you may not think that would make any difference, but oh boy, it does. Makes a huge difference. And those are the things that are, to me, quite surprising when you make the kite and you get out and fly it and you say, wow, this really made a big difference. So those are the things to pay attention to when you're trying to pick a kite that will give you the most enjoyment at the time you're ready to fly the kite.